There you go.
Okay, Christy and Melissa, can you hear me? We're doing roll call right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we just had to switch something up. Okay, so we have all 5 board members here. I'm doing the remote script right now. For staff, I guess is there any staff online that need to call out? Okay, let's see, we've got Paul Berard.
Present.
Thank you. And here in the room, we have Erica Mooney, Libby Gibson, Janet Schulte, Greg Tivnan, Jeff Carlson, Chuck Larson, and Lauren Sinatra. Anybody who's also attending will be speak. John Comey. Sorry if I got your last name wrong.
Como.
Thank you, John. And then Jamie Fair.
Hello.
And then Gene Bollinger.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, I think that is everybody for who is here with us. I have a little bit more. Open meeting of the select board the meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment as previously noted. We will have some public comment, but it will be limited today. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly. This goes for those more so for us here for the microphones. Members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And there might not be much votes here today. It's more direction and consensus building for a workshop. I think that's it for the remote meeting script. We also, Julia, do you want to introduce yourself and your team?
Yeah, good afternoon. So I'm Julia Novak. I'm a executive vice president with Raftellus, and my colleague Catherine Carter is here. And we've been kind of working with the town shepherding this facilities master plan discussion. So we're going to facilitate the conversation this afternoon.
Thank you. I think overall, we want to give direction to town staff on the facilities master plan. It's quite complicated. It's quite layered. But having a larger strategy and clear direction will allow us to implement something versus just being reactive all the time and not being as efficient as we can. So I really hope that we can move forward in giving everyone direction with this facilities master plan. So Julie, do you want to start or
Yeah,
anybody else?
I'll start.
Okay.
We have a PowerPoint that is going to kind of help us focus. So Eric is going to share her screen. But as the chair pointed out, really the purpose of today's meeting is to provide board direction on the municipal facilities strategy. So that's really going to be our focus. The other piece, kind of the second purpose, is to share information and receive board input on the DPW concept plan. And some of the folks that were introduced earlier are from Weston and Sampson. Jamie Fair is going to be making that part of the presentation. So that is where we are. I'm going to wait till we get the screen up so we all stay on the same song sheet. I have great confidence in you, Erica, but you're not going to do that. You gotta put it in presenter mode before you go to there. There. There you go. All right. Jamie, would you confirm that you can see this?
I am not seeing anything right now.
Oh. Share your screen.
I'm sorry, did you ask me to share my screen or am I waiting?
No,
for
no,
you?
no, we're working on it over
Oh,
here.
Okay, no problem. Yep.
It's in the background for us, but we're working on it.
No problem.
She's got it. Hey, Jamie, when you can see our screen, would you let me know that you are seeing it?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. I rescheduled this in July, yeah.
Looks like it's coming up. Here it is. Yep.
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Excellent.
Good work and the wonders of technology. Okay, so and now the tricky part is I'm in charge of my own screen clicking, maybe. Oh, magic. All right, we have success. So again, the purpose of today's meeting is for the board to give the direction on the overall municipal strategy, to share an update and get some input from the board on the DTPW concept plan. So that'll be our main focus. We do have some slides to just give a kind of a big picture financial overview, and then we'll end by talking about next steps. There's a number of kind of future discussion topics, things we've touched on at previous meetings, but we're not going to talk about today. They're just listed here to let you all know we haven't forgotten about them, but that's not on the table for today's conversation. Maybe just, yeah, if you click, I lose. Okay. So municipal operations and facilities. So where does, the origin of this, when we did the board's strategic planning process in 2020, one of your goals was to develop a facilities master plan. So the town staff have been working with you towards that goal ever since. High level objectives of that plan: first, to make it easier for the public to access public services, reduce operating costs, and get everybody together as much as possible. Now, we've encouraging that kind of organic collaboration, which happens naturally right now. The town is in many, many different facilities, and we want to try to get as many people together in one site as possible. You also wanted to use town-owned property for this new facility, so we've been focusing on 2 fairgrounds, and then there will be a need to repurpose, to renovate, and remove other buildings that can allow for different uses and create some additional efficiencies. Understand, as we go through this process, it's a constant chess game where there's going to be temporary buildings, temporary facilities, trailers, repurposed spaces, people moving multiple times. Some of that shell game is already underway, but the timeline for sequencing municipal office movement is going to be really important, and prior to everyone getting to their final location. A couple of other objectives that are important for the facilities master plan. One is energy efficiency, kind of incorporating that into the design of the new facility, as well as any renovations to existing town facilities and building. And then finally, to kind of incorporate the climate change, sea level rise measures that were in the 2020 Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee's recommendations. So those have been the objectives that have guided the plan development. So for municipal offices, kind of just an orientation. Where we are now currently downtown at 16 Broad, we have the town admin, housing and real estate. The DEI position is there, human resources, the town clerk, the registry of deeds, the registry of motor vehicles, and the courts. 20 South Water Street, the sheriff and the NERDA office. East Chestnut Street is where our Health and Human Services offices are, although they've been moving to 131 Pleasant as a temporary measure right now because of overcrowding. 25 Federal Street, where the Office of Culture and Tourism is. And then potentially And there needs to be some analysis done, but as we move some of the municipal operations away from the existing building at 16 Broad Street, what we imagine is that the town clerk would be there with the registry of deeds and the registry of motor vehicles. There would be room there for the courts and the sheriff's office, potentially for NERDA, although they may need to be elsewhere. The visitor service center and community meeting rooms, some space and additional restrooms, and then the Office of Culture and Tourism. Other kind of the detail for the other downtown block properties, 20 South Water Street. I love this. We have the old police station, and then at 1 East Chestnut, we have the old police station. But first at 20 South Water, we've got the relocation for the NERDA office, which is kind of under consideration. And ultimately, the facility would be demolished or removed for a different use. So it could be a downtown police substation. It could be parking coordinator spaces, could be expanded restrooms or community space. So there's a lot of options there once those moves are made. 1 East Chestnut, short term, it could be a temporary swing space, office space. Offices will move temporarily to 131 Pleasant Street before they're permanently moved to 2 Fairgrounds. And then long-term, probably demolish this building and open up some green space in the downtown or reconfigure it along with 20 South Water and the Visitor Service Center property. 25 Federal Street, the building will remain. And the hope there is to just do some renovation to expand the bathrooms and the Visitors Center area. 2 Fairgrounds. So currently that's where the planning and land use services are located, as well as the energy coordinator, the DPW sign shop, police maintenance, storage garage, and IT equipment. So you have some things there. But potentially, again, with the idea being of moving as many operations as possible to this new location, we'd have health and human services there, natural resources, finance, town admin, HR, sustainability, including that energy coordinator, housing and real estate, plus DEI. There'd be meeting space, administrative offices for DPW, IT and GIS, and recreation. The other town properties, we're just kind of going through a list of what's there and what the potential is. 34 Washington, where we have the harbor master and some public restrooms. This will be rebuilt in 21-22, and there's no other changes are currently planned for that location. 37 Washington Street, where our finance office is, everything's going to move to 2 Fairgrounds. The idea being that we would demolish the building and have adjacent parking lot would be enlarged. 4 Fairgrounds, there's really no change anticipated here. Dispatch, fire, ITGIS, police, and the community meeting room where we are right now. And then 131 Pleasant Street, temporarily, when we have the natural resources there, health and human services, and some meeting space. We need to address the gas pumps and determine future for vehicle fueling. But ultimately this will be repurposed for housing once all the temporary functions get moved to 2 Fairgrounds. So we put all of this, a couple other things, sorry. Did I click past? I did. 2 Bathing Beach Road, we have natural resources. And in the future, this could be a place for some recreation functions, but the building itself would either be demolished or renovated and repurposed or potentially even moved. The Shellfish Hatchery, no changes are planned there. And then, the 188 Nantucket with DPW operations, we're going to hear a lot about potential for reuse of what we might do to plan for DPW later today. And this is just the inventory of what is there. Other facilities, just to kind of complete the list. 293 Nantucket, we have the unstaffed firehouse, then 10 Sankaty Road, we have the Sconset Firehouse, which is unstaffed. There's some planning there for housing expansion or relocation or perhaps an emergency shelter. So that's still being evaluated. And then 131 Pleasant Street, the former fire headquarters. We're looking for temporary occupancy for NRD and HHS, and then permanent to housing for the Affordable Housing Trust. So could be an option for dense housing and potentially some commercial space there. This next slide is a little tricky to read, but we have given you a hard copy of the slide just to have it. And essentially it shows all of those locations or all the functions of the town, where they're currently located, what the proposal is for where they would be, and then what opportunities are being presented by the relocation. So kind of what opportunities do we have to readdress how some of this space is being used once we relocate functions primarily out of the downtown area. So just to kind of keep that in mind as we go. So with that, I'm going to, you have any questions on that in terms of, seems consistent with the prior direction that you all have provided and we're continuing to move in this direction? Yeah, Don.
Yes, I just have one question of the town meeting vote where town offices were not able to move out of downtown.
Uh-huh.
So I thought we were going to do something a little bit different where some town functions stayed downtown.
So I know one of the items in terms of action steps, Udi, do you want to address that? Or you have that on the,
I was just going to mention that I don't know if it made it into a slide, but would be a step to take to seek that approval, even though it's most likely non-binding. And there would be some town offices that would remain at 16 Broad, such as the town clerk. That would really be the only town office, and then county functions and state would stay there. That's the current idea.
so there's, when we get to the action steps portion, one of the things that we would be looking for is getting approval to move those municipal offices out. So, good point. Anything else? Yeah. I can't tell if anyone has their hand raised or anything like that. So I would just.
I'm watching it.
You're
online,
watching, you
yeah.
can see it. Okay, great. So then you're in charge of that. Excellent. So with that, I think I move into DPW and the presentation by Weston and Sampson. So Jamie Fair, I think, is the main presenter for Weston and Sampson. And I'm going to click slides for him. So this will be a very elegant dance. So Jamie, just let me know when you're ready for the slides to advance.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Yes, Jamie Fair with Western Sampson. I'm a team leader, and join with me. We also have Gene Bollinger, who heads up our landscape architecture group, and John Como, who is our lead architect. And so thank you. Happy to be here. And I'll just give you a brief overview of the study that we prepared looking at the various sites for a potential new DPW. And with this slide, we'll just go through what we're going to discuss with the agenda. What's being proposed is a 50-year facility, so looking more longer term with this facility. We're going to go through the site alternatives analysis that we prepared in that process, followed by discussions of our next steps, and then questions and comments. Thank you. And so this map just gives you a look at the current public works facility locations. I'm sure you're well aware we have the main DPW facility located at 188 Nantucket Road. We have the lines and sign shop at 2 Fairgrounds, as we just mentioned a little bit earlier. In addition, at Sun Island Road at Delta Fields, there's some grounds crew storage, about 900 square feet, smaller facility. And then also at Tom Nevers Field, there's a storage building. In total, about 17,400 square feet. So we looked at 3 potential sites for the new DPW, and this would be a new consolidated DPW as the plan. We have the existing site at 188 Nantucket Road, followed by Sun Island Road at Delta Fields and Shadbush Road. And we'll take a look at each one of these. And this, again, is a map just giving you an overview of where these are located. We have the Nantucket Road that we mentioned before, Sun Island Road, right near the airport, and we'll be zooming in on that a bit, followed by Shadbush Road located furthest over to the east. So this slide, I won't go through every item here, but it gives you an example of a test fit that we did at the existing site. So we went through a programming process, and then based on the information received during that, we established the space needs for the desired program. And these site layouts, test fits that we put together show the proposed building or a potential layout of the proposed building. And so this shows all the various components that we break out, sort of the bigger pieces of the building classifications, so to speak. We have like employee facilities, which is office space, bathroom facilities, lunchrooms, things of that nature. The vehicle storage garage is the large green rectangle in the middle of the building. We'd be looking to store all of the equipment and vehicles indoors. We have workshop space in orange. The yellow space across the way, we have vehicle maintenance operations along with a new vehicle wash facility. And then we also have the administrative offices. In addition to those core building functions, we have the fueling, vehicle fueling. We have a couple of fuel island locations shown here. There'll just be one. We just show that there's 2 alternate locations with this layout, along with the salt shed and material storage. So this shows that we could, if needed, get the future program to work on this existing site. Next slide. This next series of slides is what we've been calling the Nobadier and Delta Fields complex. And this shows a larger program, which includes the development of the new DPW, which would be in Area 1. And we're going to show you just an aerial photo so you have a sense of where these are. And then we're going to bring in the various components so you see how they match together. But Area 1 would be the DPW campus. And yeah, here you can see the proposed. So 1 is the DPW, 2 is a placeholder for future housing. We understand there's a significant need there. Area 3 would be some expanded ball fields area. Area 4 over to the east furthest, that little sliver, that would be some additional boat storage that was identified. And then over on the left most side on the west, we have Area 5 would be adding a ball field and expanding the parks facilities in that area. And so this is a zoomed in version of that DPW test fit, similar to the one I showed you at Nantucket. We take those same various building components and arrange them in a way that suits the operations and vehicle circulation. And, we're showing that we can fit this, pretty easily in the area that's being identified. You can notice in the background, the existing aerial photo, we are encroaching a fair amount up into the existing ball fields. And that's really what, works well with that full ball field fit out. There have been some other discussions about, would we want to try and compress that? And we think that would be possible if it's desired. We could look again at the programming and look to get this to fit so that we would not impact those existing ball fields. But this, initial exercise we understand was to, include a full build out, including some future divisions within the DPW. And so that's what we're looking at with this sort of expanded layout, I'll call it. The next site that we looked at is Shadbush Road. The Shadbush site is where the existing Nantucket Hunting Association is currently planned, but we did take a look at it. It's the area and dotted outline there. And then the next slide, if you would, you can see the DPW would fit within that area. And then the next slide is just a zoomed in version. You can see there's some sort of a working yard area over to the left side. So this is an industrial type area. So it would be suited from that standpoint, but it's our understanding that the hunting folks have claim to this site. So that would be Shadbush. So with those test fits working, we went through a detailed site alternatives analysis. And so we're looking at the FEMA flood zones, and starting with that criteria, that really started driving a lot of the discussion. So with this current FEMA flood zone, we have 188 Nantucket Road, you can see over on the west, and that is really surrounded by the 100-year floodplain in some areas already under current conditions. And then Sun Island Road and Shadbush are both well outside of any flood concerns. And the next slide. This is a different type of model. It shows the coastal inundation zones based on modeling of various hurricane categories, 1 through 4. And we can see that with the hurricanes, we are getting flooding in and around Nantucket Road. But again, with Sun Island and Shadbush being on higher ground and more centrally located, no issues there from a coastal inundation standpoint. And then looking further ahead down the road to 2070, more long-term, you can see that Nantucket Road is encompassed by some significant flood areas, 100% chance of flooding throughout sort of that entire area. And we'll zoom in on that in a moment. Yeah, this next slide. So what we're showing here on the left is the current FEMA flood map. And the light blue area is the 100-year floodplain. And so the existing access road is flooded over on the west side of the site, and that floodplain pretty much abuts the property right now as it stands. That orange area is basically a 500-year flood, so it's a little better, but under current conditions, we are seeing flooding of that access road to the DPW, which is their emergency response facility, under the 500 and 100-year flood conditions. What we see on the right are the projections using the current models in year 2070, and we're seeing significant flooding and a lot of flood concerns in this area, more long-term associated with climate change. 100% chance of flooding of the access road in areas adjacent to the site, and then the site itself having 20% annual chance of flooding or more. So seeing a lot of issues there. Next slide. And so in summary, from a flood resilience standpoint, Nantucket Road, parts of the site have a 20% annual chance of flooding under current conditions. The site is inundated under category 1 through 4 modeled hurricanes. Projections indicate the site will flood annually in 2070, and that 0.2% or 500-year flood zone is currently present over access roadways to the site. Conversely, with Sun Island, Shadbush, being on higher ground, both sites remain dry under present and future coastal flood projections. The central location results in faster response times to all corners of the island. It is also more sustainable for DPW logistics, operations, and planning. And the site, these sites are closer to the airport and the seaport in the event of an emergency. So we did I won't go through all of these, but we identified 12 criteria that we looked at for each site and then ranked those using a number system that we use. So we could put some numbers to this to try and quantify it. We take into consideration location, climate vulnerability, permitting, cost of development, things of that nature that all come into play with the site development project, building project. And Sun Island came up with the highest score of 77. We felt that was best suited given all of the criteria of the 3 sites. Shadbush was close with the 64. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, next slide is good. Thank you. And again, this is just part of that matrix that we put together. It's probably hard to read. I wouldn't expect you to read it. Just so you know, we did go in, we put narrative and explained our rationale for each criteria for each site. So we have that documentation. And some development notes, should we move forward with the Sun Island Road site, some things to keep in mind that will be coming up as we move forward. The site is located in a public wellhead recharge district. It's a zone 2 for the drinking water wells. I understand there were preliminary discussions with the water department people, and there were some favorable remarks is what I'm told, in that, even though we are in a drinking water zone, we could put the salt shed there. There is a specific Nantucket bylaw that we list here where it specifically excludes salt storage from this drinking water zone 2. However, as I mentioned, based on discussions, is our understanding is that as long as that salt is placed under a proper salt shed, stored and managed properly, that it would be allowed. But we would seek a variance from that bylaw. And this line of thinking is, in line with what we've seen with other communities and in line with the DEP regulations, where they also allow salt storage in a drinking water zone as long as it's stored undercover and managed properly. The site, the ball field sites, and a small part of the DPW site is in an NHESP, Natural Heritage Endangered Species area. This is being assessed. It's primarily associated with the lands that are undeveloped. So we're submitting a request to the MESA office to get more details on what the species of concern are, based on preliminary discussions with some folks that have some knowledge. If we do expand the ball field areas, we would anticipate that some mitigation may be needed. It could be significant, but it's too early to tell. I wasn't hearing any showstoppers, but something that certainly we want to continue to pursue and assess. The DPW area itself is mostly out of that, so less of a concern just for that smaller footprint area. We would also look to get a zoning height variance for the salt shed. Those structures are typically 40 feet tall. We like to make them tall to allow inside dumping of the salt, which is better for the environment, keeps more of the operations undercover. There's currently a 30-foot zoning height on that property. We'd also need FAA review due to proximity to the airport, and so we would seek that. We would look to, right now we're looking at 2 driveways, and so there's a bylaw that we would need a waiver from. I'm not anticipating that being a significant issue. Storage of hazardous materials, those must be stored and managed per DEP and Nantucket requirements, and they certainly would do that with the new facility. Everything would have all state-of-the-art, double wall tanks, monitoring, stored inside, managed per all environmental regulations. So that's something that we would look closely at and make sure that we meet. And then there's also, the airport folks, I understand, would be looking for rent because it'd be using a portion of their property. So some of the things that would be coming up should we move forward with the Sun Island Road site. So next steps. Next steps would be, we'd like to have the town select a site that we can focus on. And then if Sun Island is selected, I understand that there will be or should be a meeting with the airport and the development of a memorandum of understanding, which would likely include the rent. And then we would look to verify the program, verify the size and layout of the DPW that we'd like to move forward with, finalize that layout, and then we would complete a conceptual level cost estimate. We would also then complete a geotechnical investigation of the site, make sure we get a good understanding of the soils in those areas for development and construction purposes. Then I understand we'll have voter approval for the funding, followed by the full design, bidding, and construction.
All right, well, let's go ahead maybe and stop the screen here just for a minute to allow the board to ask Jamie and his team any questions about this analysis and before we move into the next steps here.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm looking at it and I'm wondering, what are you guys suggesting to do with the landfill? I feel like we're moving half of what happens there. And so what is the thought process there?
Sure. And I guess I'll say that was something that Rob McNeil was really handling, the solid waste management piece of that. But based on my discussions with him, my understanding the landfill operations would stay where they are and basically remain the same. But he did want some of the folks that work on those facilities from an administrative standpoint be housed in the DPW. He had a office for a solid waste recycling enforcement officer. But that was it. Really, it's like one person that would be at this new facility with all the other core functions remaining where they are.
I would echo that and say that the relocation of the entire landfill facility was not really examined here because of the magnitude of what that would mean. And the uncertainty of what is going to happen there in the next 5 to 10 years. There may be technology that can be used to reduce materials that need to be transported elsewhere or things of that nature. So I think it could certainly be looked at going forward, but until we have more of a plan of operations out there, once the waste options contract is expiring, we weren't focused on that.
Yeah, and so to that regard, I think that's, I think it's great. And Sun Island for those uses is great. And I think moving to high ground is great. I think we should be moving the landfill operation in whatever configuration it is to high ground as well. And I think at some point we may want to, if technology allows it, might want to spend a few decades digging what's there. Otherwise, we'll have to hard armor it. And that's what is in the draft of the resiliency plan now is, in 20 or 30 years to start putting berms and armoring up to keep that, to keep the landfill from going into the ocean. And so I kind of think now is the time, if we're doing this type of long-term planning, that has to be in our long-term vision, or we are in my opinion, or we're doing half the job. And so, I think that this is a good start. And how do we, maybe it's a transfer station, maybe it's, turning waste to energy, and we're able to, have a unit that operates there and digs that out and then is relocated close to the new DPW building. So that's, I think, the thought process that's a thought process we should be following right now. Let's assume that there'll be something, and how are we going to handle that? You hate to, so anyway.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up a tiny bit on that. I don't think we're saying we're not looking at that, but it isn't priority number one right at the moment. We would also have to get some possibly policy direction from the board about a location for a new landfill. That takes a massive amount of permitting. And we have somewhat committed property with the hunting association or whoever that may end up with. So if that's going to change, we need to know that sooner rather than later. And I'm not sure there's a sufficient piece of town land for a solid waste operation that we wouldn't have to purchase. And most likely it would come with a lot of endangered species issues to deal with. And those are just all things that would have to be dealt with. I'm not at all saying it's not feasible or we won't be looking at it. It's just that this whole exercise about DPW operations and solid waste facility is in and of itself very large. And the initial priority is the DPW facility because it's more vulnerable, number one, and its condition, number two, is deplorable, to put it mildly.
And I think it's good to think about them. I would want to do it in 2 phases at the same time, but have them connected, but with the number one priority for the DPW facilities. It could be done, I think, in unison.
Right. And if we say, okay, here's where the DPW is going, and here's the potential area for the landfill or for the transfer station or for the, gasification plant, the mobile unit that's going to be at the site and move to this new site, that's great. But if we don't have that as part of our planning, then I think we are missing the boat, because we'll be leaving this to people 20, 30 years from now to say, oh boy, I wish they had thought about that. So I'm just saying, I hope we think about that.
Yeah, and again, we are going to need to think about it for sure. There most certainly is not space at the Nobadier farm site for a solid waste facility. I think that's pretty definitive, unless we don't want to have playing fields there.
Well, is there something to think about? And sorry, I'm thinking right out loud. With the RFP, I believe it's already out for Shadbus.
It's not out. It's not out yet.
Just, I don't know, 30 years from now, we leave some kind of exemption where it could be used for landfill something. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of how do we do some long-term planning and leave ourselves some options down the road when we don't know what's out there for the Shadbush property.
Well, I kind of, the landfill, we have, an idea what some options are, because we've gotten a bunch of requests back, a bunch of information back on what's possible. So that, hasn't been sort of, decided upon or filtered, but I've looked through the documents and there's some interesting stuff. Some of it doesn't take up all that much space. So I do think there's, anyway, my assumption was that this will be part of this exercise, and it isn't. So I'm bringing that up. The other one is the airport and the rent. I just can't help mentioning it. We gave them the land. I hope that the rent would be reasonable, and that we're all in this together. When they needed money and we're short, we ponied it up and took care of them. This is a situation where they need this as much as we do. So I would hope that when we negotiate, that would be pretty realistic.
Any other questions that we could use input from Jamie and his team?
Melissa, Christie, anybody else? We're good to the public. Julie, is it okay if I bring in a couple from the public?
Okay, Christie's got her.
Oh, sorry.
hand
Go
up.
ahead, Christie.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, I know there was some mention of what might still be in Nantucket and what might be at this new facility. And will there be a lot of the DPW trucks parking at this new facility? And if so, have we thought a little bit about kind of traffic and circulation on the Nobadier Farm Road if we go with the Nobadier location?
Sure. Yep. That's a great question. And yes, the plan is to bring all the trucks and equipment over to the Sun Island Nobadier area. We would have a vehicle storage garage constructed to ideally house all of that inside. And I would say that part of sort of the next step in the design would be to look more closely at the traffic and the circulation to make sure that's done in a safe, appropriate manner.
Matt?
Yeah, I had a suggestion from someone. They said if we were doing clean down for the DPW trucks and things, could we sort of piggyback on that and do clean down for boats, et cetera? It would be ecologically beneficial. It might be a source of income from the town. The same filters, the same things that we would use to clean down these trucks, et cetera, could be used for that. And it's something that's sorely needed on the island now. It's happening, but it's going into the groundwater in a larger place or into the harbor. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
putting that out as a possibility. Someone can write it down on their, on their list.
Writing it down now. Yes. Yep. Yeah, we could certainly take a look at that. We're going to be constructing a new truck wash. It's planned to be a manual wash, but, high pressure hoses, water reclamation, soap controls, freshwater rinse, all those types of things. If desired, we could look to make sure that could accommodate boats also.
And I think that's better than to do it twice.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
And I can't take credit for it. I sound smart, but it wasn't me.
I have a question.
Excellent. Yep.
Was there any thought to be if DPW facilities was to move to the Nobadier, the Delta Fields area,
Mhm.
what opportunities could be used of the current DPW site? Storage, sandbanks, things like that.
Yeah, that was another thing that I think Rob was kind of planning on his end mostly, but we can certainly assist with that as needed. And my sense is, as this advances to the next stage, then we can start honing in on that. You are going to have a lot of open land that's out there, and I'm thinking out loud a little bit here, but the initial plan was to have a lot of the material storage relocated over to Nobadier. I'm just making assumption, but if moving forward it's desired to compress that footprint to keep it out of the existing ball fields areas to help with, not taking ball fields, at least in the short term here, and also potential endangered species, some of that material storage could potentially stay over at Nantucket. But to your point, I think even if that happens, there still be a lot of available space over there. And I agree, a plan, should be identified as to what that's going to be. So it's, a comprehensive plan kind of addressing everything.
Well, I think, thank you, Jamie. I think it will be a huge value add.
Mhm.
Just explain to the public and just different departments could use it, whether it's a sandbank or solar array field or just lots of different options. So I'd be interested if we get to that point.
Sure. Yep. That sounds good.
So Julia, I'd like to bring our Coastal
Sure.
Resiliency Advisory Committee Chair in, Mary Longacre. Among other things, Mary.
Thank you, Jason. 2 points. One, yes, regarding coastal resiliency, not really in this case because we're making positive steps to mitigate the potential effects of coastal resiliency by moving the DPW operations, but in the larger sense of trying to, not contribute to climate change any more than the minimum. I would hope that the new facilities would be energy generators with solar, that there would be an anticipation of electric vehicles and electric power for things that might not be currently electric. Electric charging station for vehicles potentially could be available to the public as well as to the DPW, since that is a very public accessible location. And also from the environmental aspect, DPW naturally deals with, or perhaps naturally is not the right word, deals with a number of hazardous substances, petroleum-based substances, and I would want to be sure that those would be captured appropriately, that waste would be handled appropriately. You're talking about a truck wash. I did hear the remediation of the wastewater. That's a positive. But this is a sensitive site. It's near the water company works, and I would just want to make sure that we're looking at a 50-year timeframe. That we anticipate that technologies can change, and that environmental impact could be something that is much more closely scrutinized in the next few decades. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Argus Sparrow. And then after this, we'll move on.
Mhm.
Julia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I'm Arthur Gasparo, the chairman of the Airport Commission, and we were presented a preliminary design a few meetings ago by Mr. McNeil, and it was made very clear to him by the manager that this isn't a airport looking for rent. This is land that's restricted, subject to grant assurances with the FAA, and there's not a lot of room there for negotiation. I certainly agree with Mr. Fee's comments that we're all in this together. I think you all know that's always been sort of my approach with the town and the airport, but it has to ultimately be approved by the FAA, and I think that it's a higher bar than maybe is being expected in this situation, and it's going to be a very significant amount of money at fair market value for that much land. And I think that if you were to take that into your overall alternatives analysis, it may not, the conclusions may not be the same. And it's certainly, I don't like the way that it was put that, the airport's, looking for some rent. It's simply not an option. And so as far as that goes, I think some numbers should be put to that. Appraisals have been done. The manager has provided all of that information to the former director. So whether that didn't get to Weston and Sampson or not, I don't know, but that would be fairly disappointing. So I think that the other piece of things is being greatly discounted is the endangered species issue. The natural heritage, the estimated priority habitat mapping for that entire area, the land is all going to have mitigation, and the costs associated with that are very large, or you have to restrict other pieces of land. And I think that if you get into the details of that, this alternatives analysis does not come out as clear as is being presented.
Thank you, Art.
I think that the DPW site where it is right now, if you just look at some of these projections, it may seem like knee jerk. Yes, it's close to areas subject to flooding, but I would raise to you as an engineer that much of that site is at elevation 10. Much of Brant Point is at elevation 3 and 4. It was mentioned in a piece of this proposal that, you could bring in some fill. a couple of feet of fill would completely skew that flooding potential. And, you know, I heard what you said about berms and how much do we want to armor, but, you know, in this case, I think it's really worth looking at making some slight adjustments to a facility that's not going to cost the town a lot of money on an annual basis, that is not within the wellhead protection district. Putting on my traffic hat, it takes 20 minutes to get down from one end of Nobadier Farm Road to the other right now. I mean, and you're going to bring all that traffic over there. I think that you really should look hard at what could be done with the current facility and not just jump to that these other alternatives may be so preferred. In
Thank you,
terms
Art.
of, you know, working with the airport, absolutely. We
Sorry,
are.
Art, I got to get back to this workshop. We're getting a little too in the weeds, us too. Thank you, Art. Julia?
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead then, so the select board's questions have been addressed. We're going to just give you a high-level financial overview, then Brian Turbot is on, and so we'll need to share the screen again. Back to the slides, and Catherine can help if you want. You got it? Okay.
While we're going to those slides, I just want to comment that these are indeed high-level numbers. They
Yes.
are absolutely not in any way, shape, or form definitive. They have not been thoroughly evaluated or reviewed. They are estimates only to give a general idea of what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
and I think we just want to try to not get too, I'm going into weeds myself. I'm asking about uses for DPW after it's gone. So I just want to try to bring us all back to just looking at the bigger picture and trying to, we'll get into a lot of the numbers later in feasibility.
All right, let me just get back to where we need to be. And Brian, I know you're out there in attending virtually, so I'm going to get to the slides here and give it to you to give the overview, financial overview. So here we go.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So as Libby mentioned to the members of the board, these are extremely preliminary numbers that we've put down on this paper for all of these projects. I will point out that when we went through this, the temporary space for plus during construction, estimate of 500,000, demo of East Chestnut Street, construction of the bike park, demos of 3739 Washington Street, renovations to Bathing Beach Road building, and most likely the expansion of the Washington Street Park would all be financed with something other than a borrowing. And I should have included renovations to 25 Federal Street in there. We could fund those through either the 1% of local estimated receipts for raise and appropriate annually for capital or free cash or potential reappropriations. So those we believe we would be able to fund in other ways. The larger ticket items being the municipal building, the DPW facility, the Orkawa House, the renovations to Broad Street, 20 South Water Street, all would be funded with borrowings, debt exclusions, which we would. We've looked at very preliminarily what it would do to the tax rate, but it's still most likely we would try to push the borrowings out a few years because over the next 2 or 3 years, we're staying pretty consistent at about $9.5 million in debt service on an annualized basis. After 25, it starts to slowly go down. And we still have to work in some of the other projects that we have outstanding that we would be funding, that we funded through debt right now. Preliminarily, we have looked at it, but we have not, I've certainly not done a super deep dive into exactly to the penny what every one of these projects would cost on the tax rate. It certainly will raise the tax rate as we go. But we're working with Cinder right now to try to plan an integration strategy that would hopefully keep the debt service in the $9.5 million range on an annual basis, which is where we're at right now. And then there's some other facilities here that we still are working on, as you can see, on the costs, and then figuring a way to implement those into the plan as well, should they be deemed worthy to move forward, other than our island home, which we talked about last night.
Any questions for Brian on these tiny little numbers? Thank you for laughing. The questions for Brian? Okay. Then what we want to do is kind of hit what our action steps are going forward. So the first one is to ensure that we have kind of general agreement from the board on the plan for the municipal offices. So that was all the issues we covered first. It's the spreadsheet that you have, the slide you have there in front of you. And it's kind of been pulled together from two other conversations that you all have had as a board. So is there general consensus that this is the direction you still want to go with regards to primarily relocating major functions at fairgrounds?
It is for me.
Dawn, yeah, okay. Matt, yes.
As long as
And
we
I-
keep some presence in town.
Some presence in town. So the prep plan is for the clerks to remain downtown. And then I can't see faces, but Jason, you can. So if Christy's
got a thumbs up.
thumbs up, excellent. Melissa.
Melissa, thumbs up.
Okay, so we have agreement on that. And then there needs to be that approval, as Dawn raised, to move the municipal offices out of town. So that is something that will come back to the board.
Yep, I will add that to our list of potential town meeting warrant articles.
Okay, so that'll be coming back to as a town meeting warrant article. The third item is to affirm the concept plan for DPW. So we didn't have a lot of discussion on that this evening, but obviously the thought is kind of moving towards this more highly rated site at Nobadier Farms. Any pause, questions, concerns, or other direction from the board?
Can I go back to fairgrounds first real quick? The only comment I had on 2 fairgrounds, and this is minor, but I'm not sure that we need to do temporary buildings and all that. I think if we build an urban building along the Old South and Fairgrounds, keep the remaining building in place. There's enough space to build there, make it a focal building along those roads, then tear the building down. I think that would be a way to sequence it. Now that's in the future. I think we have to start viewing this area as an urban environment as opposed to a suburban environment, which is sort of how we designed this building that we're in with, 30 feet out to the road and lots of green space. I think we should be closer to the street. That'll give us more space for parking behind, you're not looking at it, and it will give us more space for housing and other uses down the road. And so that was just one comment I had there.
Okay. Thank you.
And now on the if I can, on the DPW, I'd like to know from Weston and Sampson is what Art had a good point was, was the information from the airport available and considered?
Jamie, did you have that information?
No, I that's actually the first I've heard of on a lot of those topics. I was working primarily with Rob, and all I understood was that there would need to be an agreement on the rent. I heard a lot of Art's concerns, and I can understand where he's coming from. Just from our standpoint, I don't agree with everything that was said, but I haven't really spoken to Art before about any of this. This is the first time it's come up. I'm not sure how much you'd like me to kind of go into that, but that's
It probably would make sense there, please, Libby.
If we're talking about the issue of rent, I don't know exactly what we're talking about. Is that the issue that you mean?
Well, I'm talking, you were saying that they had talked about rent. They had talked
Yeah.
about that property not being available. And every time that and I understand why it isn't, every time we have an FAA document, I pointed out to the board that we're basically, signing our firstborn away, the way those things are written. And I think that's what he's referring to is that, this has to go through the FAA, but having done that with the Delta fields, there is a way to do that.
Yeah,
So-
we may be getting a little too down the road. We don't need to get down. There will be a rent requirement. That is a given, that is known, needs to be understood going forward. It will be based, as Art said, on fair market value. And yes, it will have to have FAA approval, but that shouldn't be an issue, but we should be prepared for a rental payment. And that has, again, we have not done a deep dive into that pending whether the board wants to continue exploring it or not. Not to digress too much, but Jamie and I talked pretty extensively the other day about making the existing DPW facility more resilient somehow. And I think it's a little more complicated than bringing in a couple feet of fill. It's a whole lot of feet of fill. And it would most likely involve raising the road in the area. And I'm not the engineer. Jamie could speak more intelligently about it than I, but these are all things that, again, this is a high level overview, and there's a lot more detail to quite a lot of this that we just weren't really prepared to get into today, but certainly can bring back some of that as needed.
Yeah, just real quick, following up what Libby said, part of what's going to happen in all the wetlands on the island is they're all going to want to expand, and they're going to want to expand substantially. And that is right next to a wetland. So even though it might not be, a storm or a hurricane, it's a storm tide pathway. As it is, it's going to be worse in future years. I think, it's something we really have to be, if we're taking a 50 or 100, 150 year view, we really need to understand it. So.
Dawn?
A few things. There's like the whole facilities conversation, but then there's the whole massive flood projections, which brings up a whole nother, like, are we going to be looking at starting to do things like what they're doing in Florida, where they're raising entire roads 6 feet? I mean, what are we looking at? Because under these projections, if we're planning for this, what 2070 is saying it's going to be, downtown is gone. And all of CO2 is gone. I just, it just brings up an entire additional layer of planning conversations. But in the shorter term, the relocation of the DBW facilities, I like the central location of Sun Island. I am concerned about moving any kind of use like that intentionally into the wellhead recharge district. So I think we really need to think carefully about that. And what kind of road improvements are going to have to be paired with that kind of a use moving into that location. As well. Either there or Shadbush, because they'd be using the same road system that gets incredibly jammed up currently. Not that Nantucket Road doesn't. That's a whole another issue, that it's kind of far out from a lot of pieces of the island. So those are just the things that I'm thinking about right now. Is there at all room for Shadbush to house both the shooting range and a DPW facility? No.
I would say no, because of the endangered species. That's a real issue. It's already constricted. These numbers are not correct, but I'm thinking it's something like 29 or 30 acres in total, and only 9 of it can potentially be used even for the shooting facility, and the DPW facility would be much larger than that.
Now, can you sometimes do trade-offs as national heritage where other land is used as the trade-off, so you can build on more, or you can make financial contributions?
Those are all possibilities, none of which has been examined very thoroughly at this point. Again, pending what the board how deep we want to get into an area like that. We would most likely have to purchase property somewhere else of like habitat, which could be costly in and of itself, but it's not, impossible.
It can, and it does not necessarily have to be on Nantucket.
Yeah.
So just some ideas, because we have to think outside the box a little bit. Just the one thing I like about that is that it's not in the wellhead. It's a little bit more out of the way.
And here's the crazy thought I had about, setting land aside, putting conservation restrictions. I thought, let's put it on some of our beaches that we aren't going to do anything on anyhow. I mean, is there any way, and who knows? I mean, I'm going to be told that it's not possible, but it was just something I think should be examined.
Matt, I think that could definitely be explored, but typically natural heritage requires like habitat, and I don't think beaches would be a substitute for that type of habitat. Jeff probably knows much more than I do about that.
Okay, so move boldly with caution about the DPW. Is that so? Kind of move in this direction, understand what the implications are. And it sounds like closing the loop on conversations. Maybe Paul can help with the with Weston and Sampson, make sure they have information from the airport.
Yeah, Julia, I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing is we want to keep exploring.
Yep.
But not, nothing at town meeting this year, but just we need more information on a lot of different things.
Okay.
And I think this is good planning. We usually don't plan 50 years ahead or 100 years ahead. Not since I've been on the board until
Yeah.
recently.
Okay.
So can I just say as a follow-up then, maybe one of the next steps on this particular issue with the DPW facility would be to come up with a list of additional things to explore, bring that back to the board before we start exploring them, because some of them are going to be costly.
Mhm.
Art mentioned the endangered species at the Sun Island site, and that is not an insignificant issue. However, mapping that area is going to have a cost to it. So maybe we come back with this list of items with potential costs to do them and determine if we have the funding available or not, or do we need to go to the next town meeting to get it, or what, something like that. But I think it'd be good to get all issues captured before we do too much more.
Yeah, make sure the board's moving in the same direction then.
Mhm.
That's good. Okay. The next, so that'll happen kind of to move forward on DPW. Then with regard to the municipal site, the staff's going to figure out an estimate to hire and engage an architect to do the space needs analysis design for building that central facility at 2 fairgrounds. And obviously, Matt, like the suggestions you had, those are things they'll start taking into consideration when they get to that design phase and figure out how the whole phasing of buildings will happen. There is some money proposed in upcoming CIPs, $6 million for the municipal building design phase and $3 million for the DPW. So that's kind of coming forward. And in the FY23 budget process, staff's going to provide you with kind of what the multi-year financial impact of all this looks like for the town. Sound reasonable? Okay. Then I think that brings us to conclusion in terms of the presentation and the conversation that was anticipated today.
Is that Erica? Sure. Well, I was expecting this to go at least 2 hours. So if you guys are okay to take any more public comment, Mary Longacre? Sure. And then Melissa, Christie, if you had any other comments. I was trying to watch you if you had hands up, so sorry if I missed you at all.
Thank you, Jason. I want to speak specifically about coastal resilience this time. First, to remind everyone that the coastal resilience plan is due for delivery at the end of September. And any thoughts about what the impacts of sea level rise would be and how the town could respond to that should be informed by that plan. So I would encourage you not to rush to make any decisions. In particular, I want to emphasize that to take the approach that we can't do X because sea level rise is not appropriate. There are many ways to respond to the challenge of sea level rise. Protection, as Art mentioned, Don mentioned last night, that uses that are compatible with occasional flooding can go forward. Buildings can be designed to resist flooding at a certain level. There isn't really, in my mind, justification for saying that we have to leave town because it's going to be underwater in 50 years. I don't think that's the scenario that we're expecting at all. What we are trying to do is figure out what are the best ways to protect the most important pieces of Nantucket's cultural and daily life. And that definitely includes town. So there will be potential solutions for protecting town, including included in the coastal resilience plan. I can't speak to what any of them would be right now. The plan is still in development, but I just want to remind everybody that sea level rise is not, we all have to take our toys and go home and abandon a place. It's definitely something we need to plan for, but it's not something that we need to just throw up our hands and leave. We have many more options than that. So thank you for keeping that in mind.
Thank you, Mary. I think that's one of the things we're thinking about. It's also efficient town operations, trying to put everybody in one building. There is a advantage for everyone, and then public and community benefit of having everything in one place. And then keeping things downtown for the off-season economy
Can I,
are the things I'm thinking about.
not to interrupt, I'm sorry if I am, I just wanted to comment that this effort of figuring out where municipal offices are going to be and centralizing them and all is not new. This is not a new discussion. We've been having this discussion for at least 20 years. And for a while there was thinking that all town offices should be downtown in a consolidated facility. And if some of you might recall, in 1997 or 98, there was a proposal for a complex at the 16 Broad area. It was going to cost something like $5 million or less. It was shot down. And that sounds like kind of a bargain at this point. And efforts continued on. In 2010. We had another pretty significant study with several options of where town offices could be located, including a large complex, again, at the 16 Broad area. And then, that actually didn't really progress because the finance committee and the board at the time wanted to see a larger master plan for town facilities. So here we are 11 years later. And now the sea level rise projections have come out. So as Mary says, there are resilience measures that can be taken, but a determination, I guess, that is just going to have to be made one way or the other is, where do we want these town offices? And it's sounding like at this point, the board is with the preference of moving them out of town, with some staying downtown, the courts and the town clerk and registry and I guess, and sheriff perhaps. But I just wanted to point out that the idea of offices downtown to reinvigorate the downtown has been, at the forefront of some of these discussions in the past.
Yeah, one concern, keeping the town clerk downtown is making sure that there's space out here for some of the sensitive documents and things. There's things in that building that if they were flooded, we don't want that to happen. And so I think that there's, when I think about building a building here, I think we build, sort of 2 floors in the cellar. Or this is bone dry. I own property down the street. It's bone dry out here. It's high ground. We could go down and put plenty of storage, under whatever we build, and take care of things like that in a, sort of very, the right way. It's sort of like when they build libraries and things, they're very well ventilated and, all that kind of stuff. We could be doing that, humidity controlled. We could be doing that for some of those documents here whenever we get to it. So.
Anybody else? The board? I do. Okay, we'll go to Noah.
Good. Thank you, Jason. Just two quick comments, and thank you for taking the question and for the meeting. I just wanted to support and echo our chair's comments that he related about the FAA revenue use policy. It does end up being a technical and legal conversation. I know it's going to be more than anyone would want to hear in this workshop, but select board members have come to the airport for various items before. I think I can speak for Tom that if at any time somebody would want to come for a conversation or a tour, we could discuss those items. And also that we're not issuing any RFPs for the Sun Island lots, knowing that the town is having these conversations. We sort of continuously accrete interest from parties, whether it's for Bunker Road or Sun Island Road, who would like us to release interest proposals for the use of land. So we do accumulate those. I think one item that would be helpful for us is just understand your time frame. So if there is a continued interest, we don't undercut the town's opportunity or availability to execute their plan. So thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Anything else we want to discuss while we're here? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, Julia, you're all set?
Yeah, that was all we had for you, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry, Erica.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Christy Ferrantella.
Hi.
Melissa Murphy both said aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Take care.